Now, a section of matatu owners and operators identifying themselves as the National Confederation of Public Transporters are accusing fellow matatu operator organizations for acting in cahoots with government agencies to eject 14-seater matatus from Nairobi City in favor of the high-capacity matatus. Now, the legal notice 179 of December 31st, 2014 that stopped licensing of the 14-seater matatus came into effect on January the 1st, sending matatu operators in and out of the courts trying to stop its implementation. We now want to bring in the chairman of the Matatu Owners Association, Mr. Simon Kimutai, for his take with regards to the flying allegations. Now, Mr. Kimutai, joining us from our CBD studios, many thanks for making time. Now, what do you make of these allegations that have been fronted against you?
These are false allegations. I don't think they know anything about the association that I represent. As we talk now, we have a court order that we obtained today from the Constitution and Human Rights Division of the court. Justice Lady Okwany has ruled that our members whom we applied for be issued with licenses. So the allegations are null and void. I don't think they'd rather get facts right. These are new coming associations or federations, and they don't understand a thing. So the best thing is they'd rather be factual than just to have guesses and allegations that are not founded.
All right, Mr. Simon Kimutai, now let's talk about the banning of 14-seater matatus, or rather the non-renewed licenses of 14-seater matatus. We well know of the legal notice that actually came into effect in 2014 and was stopped and came into effect on January 1st. And it is a move to actually decongest the CBD in a bid to actually get rid of the 14-seater matatus. What is your take on this particular move by the sector's regulators? And yes, you oppose it, and why exactly do you oppose it?
Well, at that time, we agreed, there was an agreement between us and the regulator that we stop bringing in new 14-seaters, but those which are already there continue being licensed until they become uneconomical to operate. You can see that the population then was big, and now it has reduced tremendously. And we were in the process of having them to be phased out without necessarily having to push anybody out of business. And what NTSA has done is that we have 14-seaters coming from the neighboring counties, which they do not have any other means of getting to town apart from 14-seaters. You can imagine all towns from Kiambu, they end up, that's where majority of some very many number of people they reside and come to Nairobi for their businesses and places of work. So you can imagine what impact it has on economy. For us, there was that agreement that there was no new entry into CBD by 14-seaters, but there's none which is new, and I don't know why this order had to come by the regulator.
All right, Mr. Kimutai, we recently witnessed the transport crisis in the CBD on December the 4th, 2018. Could we get the message that you are agitating for consultative talks between the sector regulators and stakeholders to actually avert a similar crisis to this? Because it seems the government is hell-bent on making sure the decongestion within the CBD comes into effect, and the 14-seater matatus seem to be the ones who will be thrown under the bus, so as to speak.
So let me just put this in perspective. What is the population of vehicles in Nairobi? If you see, we have over 400,000 vehicles coming and going in out of the city. And when you talk of a population of about 15,000, those are, let's say, about 20,000, including both 14-seater and the higher occupancy vehicles. Do these few vehicles cause congestion? That's the question. And besides, the few vehicles that you're saying causes congestion is the main transport, mode of transport by those who don't own vehicles. So I think somebody needs to come up with a good way to dealing with this. At the same time, I think it's important for the regulator or the government in this particular place to consult properly with stakeholders. This is a business, and the government does not provide any kind of subsidy. It's purely business. The government does not provide any kind of transport for its population of Nairobi. So I think the best thing is we don't need to be tossed right, left, center. We need to be consulted, and we need to provide solution. We will upgrade. You know, it started earlier on 14-seater. Now the 14-seater is automatically phasing itself out. Then we came to 33. We will move on even to 100 at one time. But what it requires is proper planning. We don't have any person who's planning for the government, and it's just an issue of issuing orders, which eventually they have to swallow the humble pie.
All right, speaking of solutions, the Transport Cabinet Secretary actually said that 11 commuter trains and 64 high-capacity buses will be in Nairobi by February of 2019. As we anticipate this move by the government, once this comes into effect, if it does, will you support it as members of the Matatu Owners Association?
You know, rail transport and matatus, or rather road transport, they complement each other. Rail transport does not give door-to-door service, unlike the matatus, which takes you right to your doorstep. So, and when we talk of 2019, are we introducing new railways? You know, to build the railways, it will take some time. I don't know whether some will have been built by next month. But in any case, we ain't opposed to that at all. We are saying we will be able to feed into that lane, but somehow we don't need to be pushed out of business in the manner that is being done now to 14-seaters.
All right, Mr. Simon Kumutai, as we conclude, perhaps since you're a stakeholder in the matatu industry, and we are actually heading towards the goal of decongesting the Nairobi CBD, what do you think, in your capacity, should actually be done, not just by the government, but other stakeholders, to make sure that this dream is not just a dream, but it will actually come into effect?
What needs to happen is that the government needs to hire experts in decongestion. It looks like they don't have knowledge on who congests the town in terms of road transport. What needs to happen is that we need to reduce number of individual vehicles, owned vehicles, which one vehicle carries an individual, and make sure that it's either expensive or make it like New York, where you can't find a place to park, so that people can have, and the county government can invest in parking outside the city, so that they can have a ride in public transport, in an area where they can park and get a ride. Those are the things that we want to see. But when you get rid of public transport, where it carries, 80% of Nairobians, then it's meaningless. Congestion will never reduce. As I had mentioned earlier, that the population of matatus is not even 10% of vehicles in the city. So what are you doing? What are you doing by removing 10% and leaving 90%? Isn't it easier to make sure that the 90% reduces and ensure that there is credible and reliable transport from areas of residence, or even areas where they can be able to park and have a ride?
All right, many thanks, Mr. Simon Kumutai, the chair of the Matatu Owners Association. Clearly painting the picture that he is not to blame and he's not in cahoots with the government in order for the detrimental of the matatu industry in Nairobi and around the country. Many thanks for painting a clear picture for us. We'll definitely continue pursuing that particular story even as it develops. Let's move on.